your moderator, and then I'll let her introduce the panel of folks. And you will then not see or hear from me for a while. I'll keep myself silent, but I will be here again responding to the chat if anything is needed. And I'm so grateful for so many people from all over coming to join us. This is spectacular. So thank you so much. So Christiana Lilly is our moderator today. She is an award-winning freelance journalist who has covered several issues such as domestic violence, human trafficking, teen suicide, conversion therapy, the ivory trade, and many other issues that impact our communities. Her work has been recognized by the Society of Professional Journalists Florida chapter, the Florida Magazine Association, and the Florida Press Club. Christiana was born in Florida, but was raised throughout Asia as her foreign service officer father work had them move every 2 to 4 years. After graduating from high school in China, she moved to Florida to attend the University of Florida, where she graduated with a degree in journalism. Today, Christiana lives in Pompano Beach with her husband and their pup. That's so cute. And proudly serves on the board of No More Tears. And I'm so grateful again for you all for doing this. So Christiana, I turn it over to you as moderator to introduce your panel and to take it away. Thank you again so much for everyone who's participating and attending tonight.
Thank you so much, Laura. And you also forgot to mention you were one of the early volunteers with No More Tears, and you helped us get off onto our feet. I know we've, had a very grassroots movement, and that's what sets us apart. And when I talk about SOMI a little bit, we're going to explain what we do at No More Tears. So again, thank you so much, College Brides Walk, for inviting us to be a part of your 2021 virtual event this year. I'm sorry we weren't able to be in person, but you know what? This allows us to have people from all over be a part of this and be a part of this very important discussion. So today we wanted to talk about the different stigmas that survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking face. We have 2 survivors that are going to be joining us today, and we're really excited to have them share their stories. It's not easy to do, and not everybody's comfortable with it. We understand that, but these 2 today said they wanted to share their story and share what they've learned. So first, our panelists, we have Somi Ali. Somi, if you could wave to everybody. She is originally from Karachi, Pakistan, and she's a survivor of sexual abuse, domestic violence, and rape in her teenage years. A former Bollywood actress, she was in 10 films before she moved to the US to pursue her education in psychology and broadcast journalism. And then in 2007, she started No More Tears. And this is a not-for-profit organization that rescues and assists domestic violence and human trafficking victims and turns them into survivors. And what sets us apart is that it's completely volunteer run. And in 2020, which was terrible for all nonprofits because, donations were low, we assisted more than 100 victims of physical and sexual violence. And while we don't do it for the awards, it's really nice when we do get recognized. So Somi has gotten accolades for her advocacy, including the American Heritage Award from the American Immigration Council, the Daily Point of Light Award from George H.W. Bush, the National Domestic Violence Month, a proclamation by President Barack Obama, and she was also a L'Oreal Paris Women of Worth honoree. So thank you so much, Somi. So she's going to be speaking as an expert, as a victim's advocate, as well as a survivor. And then our first survivor, we have Noah Lowry. Noah, if you could wave to everybody. There we go. He is a survivor of human trafficking, and now he's an advocate at just 19 years old. He's using his past experiences to help educate people in power about issues surrounding human trafficking and LGBTQ+ sexual violence. He spends his time advocating for misrepresented and unheard voices, pushing the envelope of hypermasculinity and gender roles when it comes to male trauma. And I noticed that we had a couple gentlemen on this panel, and I'm really glad to see that you all are joining in here because violence can occur against men and women. While it might be mostly against women, it does happen to men, and they're less likely to speak up and report these crimes. And so we're so happy to have people like Noah that are able to speak up about what's happened to them. He is currently in Miami, and he is partnering with No More Tears, which he said he's honored and grateful every time he has the ability to use his voice to promote change. And his goal is to aid in making the world a better place. And then we also have another survivor, Rose Planche. Rose, if you could wave to everybody, there she is. And she is a busy mom of 4, which that alone makes her a survivor. And that includes twins. And not only that, but she's also a proud member of the Chi Upsilon Sigma National Latin Sorority. And we're so grateful that we've been able to partner with them for the last couple months. They reached out to us asking if we could be their charity of choice to do their advocacy for. We're really excited to partner with them, and they've been such a great support for us. And so Rose hasn't shied away from sharing her story and talking to people about her experiences, but today is actually her first time speaking in a public forum. So if we could all give her a round of applause, that we're so honored to have her here today. And then finally, we have Sarah Bartley. Sarah, if you could wave to everybody. And she is a licensed clinical social worker, and she provides psychotherapy services to a variety of individuals through her private practice. Her specialty and passion is working with people that have experienced trauma, in particular interpersonal trauma, human trafficking, and domestic violence, which is why she has been such a great volunteer for us, providing her services for No More Tears victims, talking to them about their experiences, helping them get through the coping and becoming an independent person who appreciates and values themselves. She also works with the LGBTQ community, and she has experience working with people dealing with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, autism, gender dysphoria, and facilitating family, psychoeducational, and LGBTQ specific trauma support groups. And she believes that people can work on themselves and believes in the wisdom of each of us and our ability to create change in ourselves. And I love that, and that's why we turn to her. Thank you so much, Sarah, for all you've done for so many of our survivors, helping them turn from victims to survivors. All right, so like I said before, what we're going to be focusing on today is overcoming the stigma. As many of you may know, as survivors or who have had loved ones who are survivors, there's so many misconceptions and stigmas that they face, and it could be just out of meanness or just plain naivete. So the first stigma, I know Somi, it drives her crazy. The first one I wanted to talk about is the stigma of, why didn't they just leave? So Somi, as a victim's advocate and as somebody that has experienced violence and has helped countless people through violence, tell us about the naivety and why it's so naive to be able to just brush it off as, why didn't they just leave?
Well, I think people are not to be rude, but I think people are lazy and they're not educating themselves in this subject, and they need to understand that you can't just go. You don't have money, you have nowhere to go. Shelters are primarily always full. You don't know where you are geographically because you're brought here from a different country. In many instances, we work with a lot of women that are brought here from different countries. You've given birth to children in the United States, and your husband or your wife, because men get abused too, are threatening you of losing your children because they were born in the US and your paperwork, you're undocumented. I've had abusers actually say that we keep them on a leash, that's why we don't file for their paperwork. So we threaten them to get deported anytime that they talk about calling the cops after I beat her. And whereas, a lot of victims don't know that the cops cannot ask you about your immigration status. If there's a DV call, they have no right to ask you about your immigration status. But survivors, victims don't know this. They have no social support system. I have had, I've called a victim's mom in India where I said, your daughter's hand was stuck in the oven because she didn't put enough salt in the food. And she said, well, I have 4 other daughters to wed here, and she's just going to have to make it work. So, there's so many obstacles because especially when they come from third world countries and they have no social support system here, they have no friends. And what they do is they keep them isolated they don't allow them to drive. They don't allow them to learn English, go to school, and they just they're like held captive. And in Pooja's case, what happened with her. For 10 years she was abused and she was just not allowed to socialize. The only thing she could do is walk around her community because she has thyroid issues, and the doctor said she needs to exercise. That's the only thing she was able to do. And that's how she bumped into an attorney, fortunately, who told her about No More Tears because she was all black and blue and she knew that she was being abused. But there's so many facets and elements that go into why survivors don't leave. And if I had $1 every time someone said, why couldn't she just leave? No More Tears would never need to fundraise.
If only we could make money off of that. And so Noah, your story begins in Missouri originally. You started being trafficked at the age of 13. You were reached out by a trafficker unknowingly to you through social media, and you thought it was a modeling job because you were modeling at that time. And they actually were trafficking you, abusing you, pimping you out to people. And so somebody ignorantly might say, well, why didn't you just tell your parents? Why didn't you say something? But from the story that I know, they had threatened you. So tell us about why you were afraid at 13, 14, 15 of telling somebody what was happening to you. So breaking the stigma of why didn't you just leave, as if it was that simple.
Right, right. Of course, for me, it was being so young, being so naive, and having these grown adults telling me they were going to kill me, they were going to kill my family, they were going to rape my mom you in front of me. That's enough to scare a child. So there was a fear of telling the truth because I felt like it was my fault for a long time. I felt guilty. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know I was going to tell my parents they were going to do something, of course, to, you know, deal with the trouble, but then they might have gotten murdered. That was what my mindset was. So it was always, don't say anything and try to figure it out yourself. Because my mindset was I got into this by myself, so figure it out yourself. And of course, you know, you get manipulated, you know, you get coerced, it's emotional, it's physical. And after being violently abused, you kind of do break down. One thing you can say is that there's always going to be different types of pimps. So there's going to be one that we define as guerrilla pimps or Romeo pimps. And I during the time of my trafficking experience, I did have both. However, it was with both, there are ways that they can manipulate someone. And for me, I fell easy victim to that at 13.
And looking back, like you were only 13, you know, we would never would have expected you to be able to get yourself in and out of a situation like that. And Rose, you had a situation with domestic violence with your abuser. And from what we were talking about, you know, he was very loving at first. Everybody around you with your family and friends thought he was so great. And so when things escalated from emotional abuse, when you were arguing, to physical abuse and severe physical abuse, you felt this pressure because of your children and because of how everybody viewed him. You felt this pressure to make it work. Can you tell us about, for you, what was your mindset about, you know, I have to make this work?
Well, for me, it was not only trying to make it work because of the pressure that I felt of my kids losing their father. Is anybody really going to believe me that he's beating on me? Because like I mentioned to you before, I'm a big woman and this is a slightly smaller than me man. So who's going to believe that I'm allowing him to hit me, or that he is hitting me? Like, and because I like how I explained to you, before this whole situation happened, I've always upheld myself as this strong, independent woman, and nobody's really it's hard for somebody who hasn't gone through the situation to believe that it could happen to me. And that was my main conflict, like trying to get to the point where I can actually tell somebody, because that was the pressure that I was feeling. Like, nobody's gonna believe me, nobody's going to understand. And then it was thinking, kind of like how Noah said, he would tell me the things that his family was capable of. And the fear that he could do that to my parents or that he could do that to my kids was really like the main stronghold of me not saying anything at all. Because the fear of something happening to them, when I actually kind of like, no, I felt like I put myself in this situation, so I need to figure out how to get myself out. And it was hard. That was really my main reason on not being able to leave.
And Sarah, you've, you know, counseled so many people dealing with human trafficking and domestic violence and just abuse overall. And I'm sure the stories that you've heard from Noah and Rose here are very familiar to you. Can you talk to us about, you know, what you've dealt with your patients and sort of the psychological healing of, you know, why they couldn't leave and why it wasn't so simple to just call the cops or tell a friend or, you know, things like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, everything that everybody said so far tends to come up. A lot of the kind of basic needs and also like threats of violence are, of course, big reasons to, you know, to stay in those relationships. And from a psychological standpoint, I think a lot of people view traumatic incidents and staying in domestic violence as a choice. Like, why would you choose that? And most of the victims that I work with can agree that, like, at the beginning of the relationship, there was no, you know, obvious markers that, hey, you're going to be entering a very abusive relationship. So it tends to develop over time. And I think folks sometimes view it as just a quick fix. And the nature of trauma is that it really impacts you not only psychologically, but physically through the mind-body connection. So, you know, like when anyone experiences any kind of traumatic incident, there's a great need for connection. And when you have these other elements that kind of make you feel like you have no other option, that you can't leave, you know, a lot of people seek that connection through the abuser, through, you know, accepting statements from the abusers that are meant to gaslight the victims. You know, abusers tend to really shift the victim's sense of reality and their sense of perception. And that really gets at people's ability to trust themselves, trust their own judgment, which all the more reinforces the need to stay with somebody that you start to trust their judgment. And, you know, through that need to connect after a traumatic incident, you know, you hear of people who maybe they get hit by their partner and then they don't understand how is it that so soon after that I'm hugging them, I want to be close to them again, what's wrong with me? And it's really a primal biological need that we need connection to heal from trauma, but unfortunately that connection just further bonds them to their abuser. So there are a lot of physiological elements at play, a lot of hormones and brain changes that occur during traumatic incidents that don't make it very simple to just look at it logically and say, oh, I'm going to leave.
And so that actually brings me to the next stigma, which is, well, at least he didn't hit you. You know, we see a lot of people where their partner yells at them, belittles them, either in private or in front of other people because they just simply don't care. And Rose, you experienced it. You said initially everything was fine. And then when you guys argued, it got a little bit more, you know, he started talking down to you, but you felt like because this is the way you've heard other men speaking to women, that this was normal. Can you talk about sort of that cultural experience you had that kind of made it was an excuse for you?
No, yeah, of course. Like I was telling you before, I grew up with a father that was naturally aggressive, verbally, and he would speak to me, my mom, and my sister any which way, very, very disrespectful, very down-putting, for any reason, you know, and when I was with this man and he began talking to me that way, I mean, of course, I spoke my mind and told him, you know, I didn't like it. But in the back of my mind, I made the excuse of, well, maybe he just has anger problems like my dad. It's okay. You know, I put up with it when I was little. My mom put up with it. So I could put up, you know, I could put up with it with him. I love him. He loves me. We'll work through it. That was my mentality, not thinking or knowing that it was going to get worse after a while. And that's exactly what it did. It kept on getting even more worse to the point where it got physical. Yeah, that was the main reason why I thought it was normal, because I grew up with it. So yeah.
And then Noah, during your time being trafficked, you mentioned before about guerrilla pimps and Romeo pimps. And for those that aren't aware, a guerrilla pimp is somebody that uses violence and force to keep the people they're trafficking in line and basically uses that physical fear to keep them in line. And then there's the Romeo pimps where they shower them with love and, well, why won't you do this for me? It's just sex. You know, they feel like I can manipulate them. So having experienced both, and with that misconception of like, well, emotional abuse isn't that bad, you know, having experienced both, what would you say to that misconception that, you know, if it's only hitting, then that's the only time you should really be worried about it?
That's a good question. Emotionally, it it messed me up, to say the least. Being so young and that being a crucial time of my life, being, an adolescent, 13, 14, 15, 16, that's about the time I was in human trafficking. Those are important years. And it really changed the dynamic of my thought process of what sex was, what a healthy relationship was, what violence was this okay, was this not? And, even though it did get physical, of course, human trafficking, emotionally it scarred me. Like, even to this day, I have to like go back and work on myself because of what has happened. And there's many times where victims will, like, whenever a traumatic experience happens, they stop, they freeze, and like even like mentally there's times where I get into intimate moments, and I just flash back to being 13. And that's a traumatic way to live. It's traumatic to now be an adult and feel like I'm a 13-year-old in certain aspects. And that's because of the trafficking. And it doesn't matter whether it's manipulation or, money, drugs, whatever it is, it still affects you the same way. Because even though we're all different, there's that still underlining fact that this is very damaging, whether that's domestic violence, human trafficking, or sexual assault.
And you had mentioned before, Noah, about having night terrors still, like your friend had to
Yes.
wake you up, and some other side effects of, having that still impacting you. Can you tell us a little bit about those experiences that you're comfortable with?
Of course, of course. So even recently, it was about maybe less than a month ago, I was hanging out with a friend and I ended up falling asleep, and I woke up to them telling me like, "Hey, are you okay? You were screaming, help me, no." And I even, now that I live alone without my parents, that I thought I conquered that, but it comes and it goes. And even right after the trafficking, my mom would have to sleep in the same room with me because I would be screaming at night. And she had to wake me up every single time that would happen. So a lot of the things, my biggest fear after trafficking and coming forward with what I had been through was not being able to mature and be an adult. So not be able to work a job, because if someone comes into the job and they look like, one of the buyers or my pimps, I would freak out. So that was, again, it's more than just, oh, he hit me or she hit me and now I have a bruise. It is a psychological bruise. It's a psychological scar, to say the least. And it definitely affects us. It's PTSD, it's depression, it's anxiety. To share that.
And I see Rose nodding very emphatically here. You were telling me about, I guess, sort of just the brainwashing you experienced, that even in that final incident where your abuser got very violent with you and the cops were called, you found yourself defending him to the cops, like, oh, I don't need to press charges. Can you tell us sort of about that day and what was going through your mind, that even though you called the cops, you didn't want him to get in trouble?
Yeah, and it's crazy now that I think about it, but at the moment, I was, even after he beat me and what I felt was almost trying to kill me because he wouldn't stop, I still was thinking about his well-being. I didn't want him to get in trouble. I didn't want him to go to jail. I didn't want his life to be ruined. And it was like, I just wanted everything to stop. But I didn't want him to get in trouble either. You understand? And it was, I can't explain it any more than just being, like I told you, it's like a situation where it's like a web and you don't know that you're there until you're caught. You're just in it. And it's unfortunate. And but I agree, like a lot of the things that Noah was saying, like, hit home. Like, I to this day have what you would say PTSD. If a male comes towards me or speaks to me in a way that is similar to how he used to speak to me, it flashes me back to that moment and I just stay frozen to the point that I'm not moving, I'm not speaking. I have my hands up like this, like in a defense mode, and I don't even realize it's happening. It's just an automatic reaction from my body because I automatically think this man is going to attack me. He may not even be, that's not his intent, but that's where it takes me because of what I've been through. And the same thing, like the bruise comes and goes. I have a scar in my eye for the rest of my life and I barely see it, but the emotional scarring is always there, and it's always in my mind. And even though I've worked hard to, pass through it and survive it, you can't help but, there be a trigger once, in a blue moon, there be a trigger that takes you back to that moment.
And then Somi and then Sarah, I'm going to ask you both the same question. How often do you see survivors, I don't want to press charges, or I don't want him to get in trouble, I don't want him to get arrested or anything, I just want him, I just want him out. How often do you see that, Somi?
I see that a lot. And my only the comforting part for me is that at least we're able to get them out, get them away from this horrible individual. The recent victim that we have rescued, the Middle Eastern victim, the first thing she said is when we filed a restraining order, she said after we filed it and it was approved by the judge, there was no way it wouldn't be approved. Her abuse was just unimaginable, and including her 3-year-old son. But once we got it approved, she said, he's not going to go to jail, is he? I don't want him to go to jail. He's not, I don't want him to go to jail. And then I said, no, he's not going to go to jail. Just don't worry about it. But she's in therapy now with Arabic speaking therapist. So she's doing well. And, but they always say that. I've had survivors where we're in the courthouse and we have filed we've written everything for the restraining order. And they're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want him to get in trouble. So it's such a psychological manipulation that it's done, and Sarah will agree. It's just so, even when I was, from the age of 16 to 24, when I was in a relationship in India and I was a victim of domestic violence, I was also always worried, like, I don't want people to know what's going on. I was embarrassed. I was scared. I was like, what are people going to think of me that I'm, putting up with this? And there's so many elements of shame. But then you're also thinking of his well-being. And it's just, it all comes with the territory. It's not just one single element. There's so many things that are, there's so many ingredients to this whole, this whole dynamic, this whole problem of domestic violence. There's so many things that people do not understand. That why are you still in love with a person? Why do you still care if something happens to them? A lay person who's not educated and a person who has not been a victim of domestic violence, it's very difficult for them to grasp and to grapple this whole situation. Why won't they just leave? And why do they still care about their well-being? So I've seen that a lot. But again, to reiterate, my comfort level is that I've gotten this woman out, I've gotten her child out, and they're safe and they're in therapy and they have a lawyer and we're filing for divorce. The crazy part is that we've had the same abuser, but we've had a new wife, a new victim, but it's the same abuser. We've had that happen to us also in 14 years because they go out and they get remarried and then they're doing the same thing all over again. So that's also something that I've witnessed. And I know Sarah can shed more light on this.
Right, Sarah, if you could expand on that about, seeing survivors maybe in therapy defending their abusers or trying to downplay what they've done.
Yeah, I certainly see a lot of that. And I find that, the nature of those interpersonal traumas, again, they really shake your sense of agency, your sense of perception, the gaslighting and manipulation that goes into all of that can really just distort perception. So I think for a lot of the folks that I've worked with, there's been a struggle of having guilt after the fact. Like, did I do the right thing? Did I really understand this the way it was? Maybe they didn't mean it that way. And also kind of getting stuck between like the person they once were versus this version that I've seen at one point, and maybe they'll change. Maybe I did do something to bring that on. A lot of stuff that's directed towards the self, that like, I caused some of this. Is it right for me to have pressed charges? So really not feeling secure in the fact that they deserve not to be treated this way, and that somebody is making a choice to abuse them in some way, and that that's, you know, ultimately not okay. Like Somi said, it just becomes so entangled with other factors that it can be really hard to see that clearly when you're kind of in the midst of it.
And so that brings us to the next stigma or misconception, and we've touched on it a bit with Noah, is why aren't you over it yet? It was so long ago, or it's over now. Why aren't you over it yet? Why can't you just get over it? Or why can't you just think happy thoughts?
Snap out of it.
Yeah. So Somi, your abuse happened decades ago, but you've talked about how you're still dealing with it, or you've just found ways to deal with it, or things come back to you. Tell me a little bit about your experience about, you know, being the age you are now, but you know, you're still remembering what happened to you as a 5-year-old.
I can smell the smell of that individual. He was a cook in our house in Pakistan. I can smell the servant quarters that he took me in 3 times. I can see his face to this day. I'm in my 40s. I can see his face. I remember everything so vividly. I remember him pulling my panties off, and I remember him touching me. I remember it very distinctly, and it will never go away from my memories, ever. I don't think a person or a child, whether they're sexually abused or physically abused, ever fully heal from this. There are triggers. I still have PTSD. Again, I was sexually abused at the age of 9. That was another, a person who worked in our house. I again remember the smell. I remember what he was wearing. I remember what he did to me very distinctly. And then when I was raped at 14 in Miami in a park, I remember every detail of it. And when I went through the domestic violence, I remember the verbal abuse. I remember everything that he said to make me feel small to this day. I remember the physical abuse. I remember the first time he physically abused me, and I was in complete and utter shock. And it took me, I just couldn't, all I kept saying again and again is, did you just slap me? Did you actually just slap me? That I remember, I just kept repeating it because it was not registering in my brain. And as for triggers, I still have triggers. If someone is standing behind me, I don't like it. I feel uncomfortable. If someone's hovering, I can't handle it. I started getting panic attacks because of that. I don't like loud places. I can't handle places that are very loud. Because a lot of abuse that happened to me in India, it was the places were the house was very loud all the time. So there are certain smells that take me back. You never fully recover from something like this. I know that Noah, he's amazing. He's one of my heroes, my personal heroes. And Rose, you're just phenomenal. I'm so happy to meet you. And I'm so proud of you, of your courage. But I know that all 3 of us, it's going to be a lifelong healing process. For me, it's one day at a time. And you know what's therapeutic for me is rescuing and helping these victims and transforming them into survivors. What's amazing for someone like Noah is to be a voice, an advocate. And for Rose to share her story for the first time today, it's phenomenal. So these are the real heroes, and this is our therapy. This is what makes me feel good.
And I saw Rose nodding with Somi when you said you slapped me, like you couldn't believe what was happening. Rose, you said the same thing when you told him. You said, you just punched me.
Yeah,
you know, like you could.
I told you, like, now when I think about it, I'm like, I laughed, but even though it wasn't funny at the moment, but that's the only thing that came out I was like, you just punched me. You punched me. And I kept on saying it because I couldn't believe that he actually punched me. And I'm saying this while he's hitting me even more, but that's what I kept on saying. I couldn't understand. Like, it's like how Somi said, my mind couldn't register what was going on, that it was actually happening. And yeah, like she said, like, I don't think it's something that I'm ever gonna be just done with, because I mean, and Sarah can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Psychologically, I feel like our mind goes to like a survival mode, and it reminds you of these moments so that when it happens, you're aware now. Like, it's like a hyper self-awareness of, you know, bling, 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 red light, you know, when it's happening, man. And for me, I don't go through as many I don't have as many vivid things that pick up my memory like Somi does, but when something happens similar to it, it does bring me back. And it's like day by day. That's the only way I think, at least for me, you can take is dealing with it situation by situation, day by day. I don't think it's something that you'll ever be able to just be done with or get over it.
And Rose, you were also talking about after, you went to court and everything was at least legally settled, that you sort of collapsed into yourself. You didn't want to talk to anybody, and people didn't seem to understand why you weren't healing the way they thought you should be. Can you tell us about what was going on for you at that time?
At that time, I was so ashamed. I felt guilty, and I really went what I call down the rabbit hole. I was depressed. I don't want to say I wanted to commit suicide, but I felt like I did not want to be here. Not that I wanted to kill myself, but I didn't want to exist. That was my thought. And that even scared me even more, having at the time my 2 children, because then I was thinking, what's going to happen to my children if I'm not here? And that was like a big, I guess, eye opener for me, that I needed to get help, because I saw myself kind of like when you're back up to a corner and you see no way out. That's where I was. And even though I had friends, because I had a lot of friends, a lot of my sisters from the sorority, and a lot of my friends who were reaching out, but because I was so depressed and I was so ashamed, I didn't even want to see them. I thought that maybe if I reached out, maybe they were going to tell me, how can you let this happen? They weren't going to understand what was going on. I felt like I was going to be judged. I was even judging myself. So it was just a very hard moment for me to even, like, it was a roller coaster for me to even try to get help, and then to try to open up and accept people back into my life to be able to share my story with them.
And then Noah, your healing process has had some ups and downs, because your case is not closed. And in fact, you said police told you that they couldn't do anything about it. And you actually still receive texts from your pimps from time to time. Tell us about how that, tell us about, what the police told you or what law enforcement told you, and how that's infringed on your ability to keep moving forward.
Of course, I will say that it was even more traumatic whenever you reach out for help and you're denied. And my response was, but you're a boy, but you're gay. How did this happen to you? Where were your parents? That's like all the questions that they would say to me. I even had a police officer say to my face, like, did you enjoy it? Like, I know it was male on male. I know you're gay. Oh, and my mom was in the room. So luckily, she fought that off. But just being victimized by the help was so much more traumatic, because it's like, well, then who can you really trust? Who can you trust if, you're seeing people who buy children, then you're seeing people who pimp children, and now you're seeing the people who don't believe children. So that was probably one of the most traumatic and the most scarring. It was the end all be all. And to go off what Rose says, you know, there were many times where, you know, there are days I can't wake up. Like I can't even get out of bed. You know, I have a terrible night's sleep. I wake up and I'm just like overthinking, or, you know, I'm thinking about what happened to me. I'm thinking about even what Somi said. I distinctly smell the same cologne that got the first time I was sexually assaulted, raped. I remember the cologne. I remember just thinking like, oh my goodness, like what's happening? What, why are your lips on mine? Why is your hand going there? Why is my body responding like this? Why, like, what is happening? What is this? So it's very distinctive in my mind. And I always have to remind myself that this is something I went through. This is something that's not currently happening. But I also have to, because my case isn't closed and because, you know, there are people out there that are not arrested, you know, I still get text messages from people who bought me. It's crazy to me. It's like, how isn't this looked at? Why is it that males are not believed? You know, why is it that LGBTQ victims are so much, the rate is so much higher, but the care is not there? You know, I would go to doctor's offices, nurses, and they would ask me the same thing, like, so what are you doing? I remember a nurse looking at me like, why are you always here? I'm like, because this is always happening. Like, what do you think? You know, and because I look a certain way, you know, people just dismiss the fact that I could be a victim. And that's just heartbreaking.
And so Sarah, as a service provider and somebody that's there to help with healing, you know, I'm sure you've seen other service providers that just don't handle it properly. So how important would you say it is for you in your position to really understand what you're doing and how, and the words, the weight of the words you tell somebody when you're helping them through this process?
Yeah, you know, I think that's hugely important. You know, I'm certainly not an expert. I'm always kind of working to improve my skills and get better, but I've also seen some kind of damaging approaches to trauma treatment. And yeah, just simply those words of even asking them, why didn't you leave, can be so fracturing to a relationship that, you know, the therapeutic relationship really depends on connection and safety. And I think sometimes we as therapists just feel as though the therapeutic relationship and therapeutic space is just inherently safe because we're always, you know, coming in with good intentions. We want to help. But I think it takes a little bit of attunement to really who you're working with and what you're saying and how that impacts them. Because it's not inherently safe. And especially for people who have experienced such lack of safety in those interpersonal relationships, or how Noah said, like even with people you expect to help you, you don't always get that response. So really being careful of what you say and why you say it, and staying away from curiosity-based questions and really sticking with, you know, clinical, intentional questions, I think is very important.
And so Noah's helped us get into the next stigma, which is that men and boys don't get abused. They can't get abused. Boys can't be raped. And that obviously is 100% not true. Somi, now, while most survivors that come to No More Tears tend to be women, there's plenty of men. And tell us about the experience you have dealing their cases and, you know, how much it probably took for them to be able to call No More Tears.
Yeah, we do. You know, this misconception that men are not abused and men are not raped and boys don't get trafficked. It's just it's so ludicrous. I don't even have words for it. It's, you know, 14 years of doing this work, we've had so many male victims, and we've had victims from the LGBTQ community who are male and they have been sold into trafficking. So this does exist, and this is a blatant fact. But I will say this, that it takes a lot because of the stigma attached to men, you know, being macho, and it takes a lot of courage for these men to call and seek help. And, you know, we have a case recently where the woman had physically and verbally been abusing the man. He's 35 years old, and for the past 4 or 5 years, and he grew up in a home where he knew that he was not going to raise his hand on a woman ever. And he kept putting up with it. And finally, he just, he called our hotline, and he said, it was so difficult for me to reach out because men are supposed to be bold and brave. And, I grew up watching football, and my dad was a, football coach or whatever. And, I'm supposed to be tough, and I can't, it's embarrassing for me to seek help, but I've seen it time and time again that every male survivor is very reluctant in the beginning when I do the intake with them. But then with time and with people, heroes like Sarah, who does all the healing with, the therapy, with time, they get well and they get better and they open up more. I'm just someone who gets the referrals and does the intake. Sarah is the real hero there. She's the one who heals them and takes care of them and gives them their confidence back and builds their self-esteem and tells them that it's going to be okay with time. And healing takes time. It's a process. And for people like myself and Noah and Rose, I know it's going to be a lifelong process.
And then also we can't forget that when there's boys and girls who witness their parents being abused, they are being victimized with that as well. Sarah, can you talk about like what impact it has on children seeing, a parent and maybe not understanding what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of impacts, but the things that kind of stand out to me the most are, one is just that children tend to be kind of like, they see the things that happen in their environment as a result of them. And so seeing mom and dad fighting, even if it has nothing to do with them, there's a sense of enmeshment in that thing that can produce like the anxiety, the depression, guilt, shame, and a lot of kids have the sense that like this isn't something we're supposed to talk about. So I could tell my teacher, but there's a sense that doing so would get them into trouble. So a lot of times kids are kind of forced to take that inward and don't really have an outlet or a means of understanding what's going on. And certainly growing up and seeing that, like that's kind of a blueprint for relationships. We often repeat those cycles that we see in our family relationships growing up and our primary caregivers. And, especially with abuse and trauma, those things can feel so normal when it's been a part of your life since day one or as long as you can remember. So it definitely impacts the mental health across the lifespan, but especially those relationships that you form later on. When you don't have an example of like a healthy connection, how do you know how to go about finding that?
And Rose, that kind of goes to what you were talking about with your experience of what you saw growing up about how men and women speak to each other and what was appropriate and not appropriate. I know you're working on stopping that with your own children. Like I said, you have 4 beautiful children. And how are you hoping, telling them, talking to them about happy relationships and exposing them to healthy relationships?
Well, just to go a little bit back on what Sarah was saying, when I was getting abused emotionally and physically by my son's father, it always happened in front of my son. And even though my son was only a baby, we're talking about months here, he took it. And my biggest fear actually became reality, because as him growing up, he became very aggressive towards his sister. He would hit her. He would, I kind of felt like I was seeing what was happening to me come through, through him. And, me and my mom together had to work together intensively with him to show him that is not what you do to a woman, because he took it. It was ingrained in his head. And that's what, every time he got upset with his sister, he was hitting her. He was pulling her by the hair. He was choking her. It was crazy. So I definitely agree. Like, kids take it, and if they don't have anything different to reference, they think it's normal. They think it's okay, and that's what they do. And with my daughter who was a little bit older than him, she was 2-3 years old, I've made it intentional to speak to her, to tell her, you know, I think I didn't feel comfortable until maybe I think a year after I had dealt with my issues, to actually sit down with her, you know, gauge how she felt about the situation, because she was a lot more aware, and apologize to her, because I felt extremely guilty that I put my daughter in this situation that I shouldn't have. And, you know, just getting her mentality of, I mean, explaining to her, you know, a man shouldn't talk to you that way. A man shouldn't put his hand on you. A man shouldn't treat you that way. And thankfully, 6 years now in a healthy relationship, and they're able to see what a good man is, you know, what a good father role is, how they should be loving and, you know, caring and saying good words to you, positive words, positive, you know, reinforcement, and not all that negativity that they used to experience before. But if you see my daughter now, she's this image of, you can't do this to me, you can't do that. And she knows, you know, you can't just talk to her any type of way. You can't come at her, you know, trying to put her down, because she knows that that's not allowed. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And that's what I try to do every day. Try to remind them of that.
And then Noah, for you, a lot of your mission is spreading the word that men, and especially people that are in the LGBTQ community, have higher rates, especially among their peers as teens, of being abused, more so than their straight peers. So tell us about why it's important for you to share your story and be so open about it.
I think it's because it's kind of similar. And I don't want to compare, but to Black Lives Matter, it's not that we're marginalized, you know, we are, and at least for what I identify, being an African American male who happens to be gay, I'm at a very, very large marginalization. So for me, it's just, you know, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. You know, I feel like if we're having someone who has almost everything against them, it's going to happen to anyone. And I think that every single time I share my story, one, it helps me heal. And two, you know, there is nothing else in this world I feel that I'm supposed to be doing. You know, I do have other goals in my life. However, the most impactful I feel like I can be on this world is to share what I've been through, because, you know, living in that world of human trafficking for 3 years, going on 4 years, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. You know, it's scary, it's traumatizing, and I think that there is this like taboo-ness about it. You know, it's like human trafficking makes a lot of money. Like, I forget the statistic, but it makes so much money. Yeah, and it's, I think, the second trafficking crime in the world right now. I think it's drug trafficking and human trafficking. Yet we don't talk about this in schools. We don't talk about this on the news. We hear about it maybe once every month, and then it's gone. But yet our children are missing. You know, this is happening at a very, very steady rate. And I just feel like there needs to be people who vocalize experiences, especially those who have survived it and who have lived through it. You know, I definitely feel like it is my calling.
And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the statistics around human trafficking. I know, like, I think Noah's correct. It's drug trafficking, and then human trafficking follows after. And it's because you can use a person over and over again. You smoke a joint once. I mean, obviously, marijuana is not the biggest issue that we have going on right now. But
no, human trafficking is a $150 billion a year industry. It is the largest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Keep in mind that our youngest victim was a 2-year-old girl that was sold on the dark web, that was being sold on the dark web. It's human trafficking has so many. There's weapons, there's endangered species, there's organ trafficking, there's labor trafficking, there's sex trafficking. But human sex trafficking and labor trafficking, I honestly feel like it's even surpassed the drug industry, because yeah, you can do cocaine once, but you can use a 9-year-old girl, and that was one of our cases, 40 times a day, and sell her. The younger the girl is, or the younger the boy is, the more money the traffickers make. And especially if it's a virgin, you get more money for virgins. It's absolutely disgusting, this world. And it is happening right here in our backyards. And it is not a third world country problem. It is happening in the United States of America. It is happening universally, globally, everywhere. California is number 1, Texas is number 2, South Florida is number 3, and then number 4 is Ohio. Those are the stats. And it's everywhere, and it impacts everyone. And kids are getting lured online, on Instagram and on their social media, and Noah knows this. It's Facebook, Instagram, all of this stuff is dangerous. That's where they're looking to groom and lure these children. If you say something like against your mom, you have a female recruiter on there pretending to be your friend, and oh yeah, I hate my mom too. Follow up that comment with that, and then meet me at 3 a.m. Let's run away together. And then next thing you know, she's in a hotel. Breaking her in is what they call it, or breaking him in. Shoot him up with heroin, have her or him raped. And that's called the breaking in process. And it is such a big problem. And we need to wake up and realize that it is as big of a problem as domestic violence is. And why are there no public service announcements on TV about human trafficking? Why are there no PSAs about sexual abuse of children? Why is there not enough awareness on domestic violence? Our job is, as human beings, and it is my mission, and I know it's Noah's mission and Rose's mission, that and everyone that's a part of No More Tears' family, our job is to break this stigma. We need to be vocal. Look, this happened to me when I was 5 years old, the first time I was sexually abused. 3 years ago is when I finally was able to start talking about it. It took me a long time. It's not easy to talk about it, because you have to literally go in that dark place. You have to go in that servant quarter. You have to smell that smell. And it's very vivid. It's not easy. And I applaud people like Noah and Rose that are vocal about what happened to them, because it is, as a survivor, I'll tell you, every time I have to talk about it, it takes a lot. It takes a lot in me to bring it out. It's very difficult. But you have to do it, because if I don't talk about it, then how will I educate the world? If I don't share my story, and if Noah doesn't share his story, how will he help other children from suffering what he suffered? Or how will Rose help other women or men from being abused or victims of domestic violence? So it is very important to be vocal. And as a society, I cannot emphasize the need for us to get educated and break this stigma and stop being ignorant and stop victim blaming. That needs to be done. It's about time. It's 2021.
And I know this is something we could spend the next 3 hours talking about, where human trafficking is starting to get a little bit more attention in mainstream, I suppose you could say. For those of us that have been talking about it, it's not new. It's been around forever. But unfortunately, a lot of people that are educating themselves about human trafficking are coming across a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And it's almost like they're being led in the wrong direction. So Somi, what would you how would you recommend to people that want to do more about human trafficking, but they don't know maybe the legitimate resources they should look to besides talking to survivors and listening to them about what their experience has been?
Go to Blue Campaign. Blue Campaign does a lot of work for HT. Go to Polaris.org. It's an excellent nonprofit, excellent organization. You will find accurate stats on there, and look for resources. Don't believe in conspiracy theories. And you and I have discussed that, Chris, about what I'm talking about. Some of the preposterous, ridiculous things that people say. that politicians are doing, and that they're drinking blood of children, and they're trafficking children. Like, it's just ludicrous, the whole thing. But go to the right resources. Polaris is one organization that I would highly recommend people to go to, and look up their stats and get educated. They're all forms of trafficking, and how they are luring these children. They're master manipulators. They know what to say. They look for the vulnerable. Look at Jeffrey Epstein. Look how long that guy kept up what he was doing and then committed suicide conveniently. Hopefully Ghislaine Maxwell doesn't commit suicide. But you know, the point is that it goes on and on and on. If you have fame and you have money and you have power, people are getting away with murder, literally. So we need to get educated, go to the right place, you know, look for the right resources and get educated. That's my advice.
And I saw that Laura dropped in the text box the website for Polaris
yes.
Project, and I believe they also run the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and they keep all
Which
the
we're affiliated with.
Which we are affiliated with. No More Tears receives referrals from Homeland Security, the FBI, local police departments, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So, you know, if you want to learn more about human trafficking, we're probably the good people to talk to, because we're the ones that are on the front lines, you know, not some weird thing you saw on Facebook. I know I get a lot of strange emails, and no, that's not true. You know, human trafficking, of course, is terrible, but if we're focusing on the wrong things, that's not helping the victims.
Right.
So I know we want to close things off, because I know Laura has a couple things to wrap us up with, and I just wanted to go through the four of you. How, you know, knowing all these misconceptions and knowing the stigma that is placed on survivors, you know, what can we do to support them? What is helpful? So Sarah, I'll start with you as a provider. You know, what is helpful to a survivor? How can you actually be proactive and give them help that they actually want and need? And of course, what I'm going to hear from Somi and Noah and Rose is, of course, going to, I'm sure, be very different across what the three of them felt was most helpful for them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I think is so important is figuring out, like, what is support to that person. So somebody might just need a safe person to be able to tell their story to, and just disclose that, hey, I'm in this situation and I don't know how to get out. Or it may be that they need help with childcare or a place to stay for a period of time. It's so unique to the person. So I think the best thing is to not go in with your idea of what you need to do, and just be open to really being curious what it is that they need for support, because ultimately, you know, the survivors know what they need for help.
Can't hear you, Chris.
I just realized.
It's okay.
My screen lit up. You are muted. All right, so Rose, and you were talking about, for you personally, you did therapy and the therapist gave you a lot of great information to think about, but for you, returning to your church community is what really felt like it brought you out of that dark place. So talk about, for you, what was helpful and what advice you would give to people who might have a loved one who's dealing with abuse or recovering from abuse.
Well, I would say as a victim and a survivor, I would say listen to yourself. You know what is best for you. I tried going to therapy, and for me, even though the therapist was amazing, I felt like it wasn't doing anything for me, and something kept on telling me to go to church, and that's what ended up helping me. But don't focus so much on what everybody else is telling you that's going to help you, but more what you know, because you know yourself how it could help you deal. And if you don't know, then obviously don't put all your eggs in one basket. Try something, and if it doesn't work, then try something else until you figure out what it is exactly that helps you. But like Sarah said, everybody's different. Not the same thing is going to help everybody, and everybody requires different attention and has different needs.
And I know sometimes when you're supporting somebody that's dealing with abuse, just sitting with them and not saying anything is the most helpful. you know,
Correct.
watching bad TV together is very therapeutic. And
Mhm.
Noah, you had a little bit of a different experience with Rose because unfortunately the church you grew up in pretty much ousted you. So therapy was something you found to be useful. So how would you explain, you know, for you, what has been really helpful from friends and family and through, you know, speaking with professionals has been helpful for you as you recover?
Of course. I'm glad you mentioned that because, like Sarah and Rose did say, everything is going to be individualized because we are all individuals. We're all unique, we're all different, and the experiences we do face is going to be different. So for me, therapy at first did work, you know, talking about it, you know, being comfortable with just speaking about the things I went through, having a listening ear that was non-judgmental, that was very helpful for me. But I definitely would say for me, individualized, it's just helping others, you know. It sucks the things that I went through, and it sucks that we live in a world where children are looked at as sexual objects. That's disgusting to me. However, you know, my mission and what makes me the most satisfied at night is helping others, knowing that even though I went through what I went through, I can leave this world knowing that I impacted somebody. I saved a child, you know, I stopped a transaction, you know, and again, it's individualized. And I think that as professionals, they should go in without judgment, without questions that are personalized. I feel like it needs to just be laid out like, this is what it is, this is what it can look like, it can happen to any and everyone, and that just be the case.
And then finally, for you, Somi, what have you found has been the most helpful for you as you go through your healing process, which is a lifelong process?
Well, you know, a friend of mine 3 years ago encouraged me to start speaking, and I had not disclosed to him that I was sexually abused as a child or raped or was a victim of domestic violence. And when I did tell him, he started crying, and he said that, I want you to share your story. And he's the one who encouraged me, and he was my pillar, you know, of strength for me. And he was also my younger brother. He's always been there for me, and he always encouraged me to, you know, be myself and speak the truth and tell your truth and share your truth. But for me, I don't think I will ever fully heal, because there's been, you know, there's no barometer for abuse. I can't say Noah's abuse was worse than mine or my abuse was worse than Rose. There's no barometer. We're all individuals, and we've all suffered in different ways and forms. So for me, I think the fact that I've started talking about it, and I've become more vocal, that in itself has been healing for me. Helping, of course, other victims and then transforming them into survivors is the best thing. It's the best reason for me to get out of bed. No More Tears is my religion. I live and breathe for No More Tears. It's the best thing it's the best purpose for me in my life, to literally get up every day and help people that are in dire situations where it's like a life and death situation. So helping others. And another thing I urge people to do if they want survivors to heal is to please believe them. Believe survivors. We have to believe them. We have to listen to them. We have to give them an opportunity to share their truth. We must believe survivors, and we have to stop blaming victims. That's very important.
And I think that's a great place to end this conversation. So I just want to say thank you so much, Sarah, Rose, Noah, Somi, everybody. We can give a round of applause from wherever we are in the world to say thank you so much. It's such, I don't even know what to say. I'm just in awe of all of you and the work that you do. And so I'm going to hand it over to Laura now. I know she had some closing words, and if anybody has any questions for any of the people that were on the panel today, you can go ahead and drop that in the chat while Laura tells us about what else we have coming up with College Brides Walk.
Just wanted to say thank you so much for this too. It was amazing, and I'm so elated that we have people participating from all over the country and even in Brazil. That's fantastic. The best we can do is to educate people, and thank you all for putting this together. Thank you for all of you for sharing stories. It's never easy, and yet it's so, so important, as we heard. I just want to say a couple little things. I echo everything that everybody said on this panel. We need to believe and listen to survivors and just hear them out. That's the only way we're going to make any kind of difference on this. We also need to learn more. All of us can learn more about these things. So Christiana and Somi and several other people mentioned several other organizations that have great statistics. I try to put some of those into the chat so you could see those if you all want to look up more. There's just a lot we can do to, just take apart these misconceptions. There's a lot we can do to take action too. And I mean, one thing, of course, is to learn more, but one thing other is to, whatever you can donate to No More Tears or to whatever organization is working on these things is always appreciated, especially now. On the COVID era, it's been so, so bad for domestic violence and human trafficking. Incidents have spiked, resources have been depleted. We need the support more than ever. And so if there's things that people can do, even just a little bit, a monthly donation or whatever it might be, super important. And if you can share one, each one teach one. If people who are on this panel today or people who listen to this today can share something with their family, friends, neighbors, whatever, very, very cool. Like, that's gonna be what spreads the word about the stories and the importance of the issues. And also just wanted to say, I know I have some Barry University students that are working on, getting like service hours for this. So if you guys registered for that, there's a whole link in Give Pulse about what I would like you to do to show that you attended tonight and you were moved by tonight. So you go back to that and you will find that out. But we have a couple more minutes. I know we said 8 p.m. And I would just like you all to say, if anyone on the panel, Somi, Christiana, Noah, Sarah, Rose, what would be the thing you would most like people to take away from tonight? That would be, I think, really cool.
I would like to say that I want anyone that's watching this, wherever they are, I don't care what country they are, what state they are in America, or if they're in India, I don't care where they are. If anyone who is being verbally, physically, or sexually abused, please know that there's help for you. We are here to help you. If it's not us, contact your local nonprofit, reach out for help. There is help available. Nobody has a right to hurt you. Nobody has a right to sexually abuse you. Nobody has a right to touch you or harm you or berate you or belittle you or make you feel small in any shape or form. So please, I urge anyone that's watching this that knows a friend, has a friend that might be getting abused, to please reach out to No More Tears. We are here to help you.
And that's so important, and thank you for saying that, because that obviously resonated. I'm looking in the chat right now and people are saying, hey, where would I point somebody who's going through this? So we now know, No More Tears USA, I put that in there. Our website is collegebrideswalk.com, and there's so many other resources, but at least those two are great starting points. And if we're not the right place to help you, we can help direct you to the right place. So thank you again for those comments. And again, it's very cool that we have people from all over the world who tuned in today to learn a little bit more. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I saw the person that asked where we can point somebody to that is having, issues of abuse. Definitely contact No More Tears. We have a crisis line. If you go to nomoretearsusa.org, as Dr. Finley left in here, we have our crisis line in there that you can reach out. If it's out of our service area, which we have taken survivors from all over, but we're able to partner with other local organizations to refer them, and these are people that we would trust to place you in. We have other organizations that we're not big fans of, and we don't refer people there. We will only refer you to somebody that we trust. So definitely nomoretearsusa.org if you or a loved one is experiencing abuse and you want to have a plan to help, if you need an escape plan put together, we will absolutely help you with that.
And that is such an important concept in terms of like the most threatening place of a domestic violence relationship is when you're leaving. So like, just be safe. We want you to get out and get safe, but like, please, just anyone who knows anyone who's in those situations, consider getting help for that. And we're again very excited that we had lots of people participating. I just posted some of our other events. Just let me give you a little heads up on those, because I know I want to be conscious of people's time. And again, I really appreciate everybody at No More Tears. Somi, Christiana, Sarah, Rose, and Noah. Thank you so much for like being part of this. We really appreciate it. This is like wonderful kickoff to our awareness events. We have another one on Thursday from 4 to 5:30. That's a deliberative dialogue. It's part of what Barry University sponsors, and it's about the intersectionality between women of color and their disproportional experience with victimization. And so if anyone's interested in that, I can send you the link to do that. You just let me know. I'm going to put my email in the chat in case anyone doesn't know how to contact me. So that's the next thing. And then on Friday is our kickoff to the College Brides Walk. It's our opening session. And again, that's in honor of victims of domestic violence who have lost their lives. And if anyone can be with us, we'd really appreciate it. You're going to hear from more survivors. But you're also going to hear, like we did tonight, stories of resilience and hope and love and performers and beautiful people who are really involved actively in trying to end this. So, hopefully if you like take a look at this, you'll be able to, participate a little bit more with us. Again, we really appreciate you. And we're so excited. I'm excited that we have people from Iowa, Brazil, New York, South Florida, all over trying to learn and appreciate and support survivors. That means a lot to me. So we thank you guys very much. Is there any other questions?